Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Client Risk Solutions. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers with VFIS Client Risk Solutions, and today we're discussing roadways with limited access and emergency response. Joining me on the program today is Jake Hoover, and Jake is an education specialist in our Education and Training department. He's here to talk about some best practices to consider when responding on roadways with limited access. Jake, I want to thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Chris, it's good to be back. It's been a little bit.
Been a little bit, but good to see you again, bud. So can you lead us off with and explain some examples of highways with limited access?
Yeah, there probably could be many. I'm going to kind of focus or hone in on two just so we have a visual for the listener out there. So I'm going to talk about highways specifically because most of our clients have those, and I think it'll bring some understanding and clarity here. One would be the highway with the emergency crossovers that we talk about. Sometimes they're median driven, so the visual would be like you can go from the north to southbound lane. There's usually typically a grass median in between with a gravel road or some type of little access road. The other one would be a median, which is hard median. So maybe a guardrail just strictly divides, and then you have the divisional aspect where you could pull a vehicle through. And I didn't want to get away from the fact that those of you that have toll roads and turnpikes sometimes will experience the same things because there's no ramp access. So when they come into the highway area and they enter into it, usually it's just a hard turn onto the road or very limited ramp access, not typical what you would see if you would merge in your car, for example. So I just want to use those as examples.
So are we currently seeing a problem in emergency services with limited access on roadways or highways, specifically what you said?
We actually are, and I wish I had some time to share statistics, but I know there's been an uptick. And honestly, when I'm out doing classes and talking to folks, it really doesn't take much. If you just get on some social media, you can probably pull a video up, a newspaper report or some type of article that's online. We're seeing people getting killed on highways that are on turnarounds. Or the other big thing is coming down the entrance or the exit ramp of a highway and coming down the wrong way, and the road's actually not controlled and getting hit by another vehicle. So we are seeing this, and again, I think we're seeing an uptick in general in injuries and death as far as roadways.
Well, when you have departments that are designating units as blocker units, you know that there's probably issues that are happening on the roadways with striking emergency services if a unit is being designated as a blocker unit when that historically wasn't in our garage or in the apparatus bay of our station.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to digress off this subject, but I mean, highway, if you ask anybody today, I mean, next to some of the, maybe the violence that we experience or fires and things like that, I would say if you ask typically any emergency responder, highways are scary, they're dangerous. I personally just had a friend hit 3 months ago, and the stories would just go on and on if you asked other people. So they are scary.
Sorry to go off topic a little bit.
No, that's a good point.
So can you explain some of the critical issues that create a high-risk situation when assessing these highways with limited access?
Yeah, so one of the obvious, I guess, discussion points is speed. So, and I'm bringing up speed because speed changes everything. We talk about this even in our classes. The higher the speed, just from our standpoint as drivers, there's more reaction time till we can actually stop vehicles. And I want you to think about that from the perspective of the civilians out there that have to stop their vehicles. So these high-speed roadways, 55, 65, 70, 80 miles an hour, depending on what part of the country you're in, you just can't stop these vehicles very well. The other thing that we're seeing is high traffic volume complicates this. So if you have long stretches or roadway where you may not have a lot of traffic volume, then you may have plenty of time to do certain things you couldn't do. But on highways, generally speaking, we have a lot of traffic volume, and that really complicates us trying to enter into that roadway when they're doing, say, 65 miles per hour. And then Just a thought process, the lack of ramp, right? Normally you exit or, a highway or enter a highway using a ramp, and these don't exist in these conditions. So with all these caveats in play, what we have is a real potential for something to go wrong and has and will go wrong.
So, can you give some examples or scenarios of what this would look like for the listener?
Right. So I want to give for sure one example. So typical highways where we're doing a U-turn, right? That's the most common. You could apply this to some of your high-speed divided highways in your communities where we don't think of them as interstates, but maybe they are high-speed in nature. But making that U-turn on a highway. So imagine you're going to a call. Maybe you're heading northbound or southbound, whatever it is, and the call is actually in the opposite lane where you were dispatched from, and you're trying to make that U-turn. This would be a scenario, if you can imagine, where you're going to have to bring that vehicle all but to a complete stop or probably to a complete stop, depending on what the division is. And then think about it from the perspective of people trying to slow down. How do they know you're going to make a left turn? How do they know you're going to cross over, specifically if you don't have any median area? And then even if you use the median area, when you pull out, they got to react to you. So real life scenario happened to me. Actually, I can speak about, we were going across the grass median, and for the time's sake of the podcast, what realistically happened is the civilian identified us. She reacted by hitting her brakes, doing all the right stuff. We thought the lane was the highway was closed down or limited in speed, and it really wasn't on the inside lane of a 4-lane area. And I watched the tractor trailer. Thank goodness the guy was skilled. Lock his trailer brakes up, reacted, and drove around her. He would have never stopped in time. And I remember that day vividly, thinking, my gosh, we just missed it. I mean, we literally missed it. And these are things that can be applied to these U-turns. And the other thing is going down wrong way ramps. We see that a lot too. And I've never done that because I wouldn't do that, but I think there are departments out there that are practicing this. And we just want to bring great caution to that, because imagine going backwards down a ramp now, same scenario, somebody's trying to stop. I think there's even a video out there of like a tractor trailer. So you don't have to go too far to get these examples just by going to social media.
Yeah, University of YouTube can teach you a lot of things, good, bad, and indifferent.
Right.
So, Jake, one last question. What would be some suggestions or best practices to help mitigate this particular issue, that's challenging emergency services?
Right. So I would say that one of the things you can do is, if you have the ability, and I say ability because I know that the nation is large and diverse, and we're trying to look at best practice for departments everywhere. But if you have the ability to go to the next exit and actually get off, turn around, come back on, you should. I always know, and there's a lot of departments that already, I think, do this, but some that don't, recommend running another unit on the opposite lane. And that's really important because, let's face it, if you're on a highway and we've all been out traveling and you don't know where you're at, you may not have a good idea if you're northbound, southbound, what exit you're between. So some communities, we have language barriers and difficulties understanding where somebody is. So just run that other unit, and then you don't have to worry about that crossover. You know what? Because if it's in the wrong lane, the other unit will get there. It also brings a degree of safety because we were talking about blockers earlier. It gives you another unit to come up and help block the situation or the scene that you're at. So very helpful in that aspect also. The other option would be is, if you're going to do a crossover, I would highly recommend as a practice is making sure that that highway is controlled. Atypically, this would be a police department communications. They shut the highway down. If you can use a crossover safely because you don't have to worry about moving traffic. You could even go back to that original scenario we talked about, going the wrong direction on a ramp. You could do that because now the roadway is shut down, but you got to make sure that that is well communicated and in place before you do that. And that takes the risk out of everything. And finally, for those departments say, look, I can't do that. Our next exit is 15, 20 miles down the road, and that probably exists. I would say just use, for the simplicity of the podcast, use great caution. Really clear those lanes. Take your time. Do not insert yourself into that roadway just abruptly. Give time for folks to actually react to you inserting yourself in that roadway, because even at 65 miles an hour, it's hard to stop a vehicle. And then just imagine when we have a tractor trailer or a large commercial vehicle on the road to do the same. So just great caution.
Absolutely. Great. That was a lot of great information, Jake. It was good to see you again, and thank you for joining the program.
Thank you, Chris.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guest, Jake Hoover, once again for his time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFIS Risk Control at VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees.